ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
This is The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
They're running a strange program, y'all.
Now, here's Frank Morano.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Let's face it, I am the person you want to begin your Christmas morning with, right? I know a lot of you are probably listening to the show and you never normally listen. You're not usually up this late. Maybe you're driving home from a raucous Christmas Eve party. I was at my dad's last night for a pretty good Christmas Eve party. I think there are still several people that are still probably there somewhere. Well, if that's you, I welcome to the other side of midnight. Now, this is our opportunity every 2 weeks, whether it's Christmas, Thanksgiving, Halloween, you name the holiday, to check in with a man who not only knows a thing or two about the Christmas star, but he knows a thing or two about everything that goes on within the world of space and everything involved in looking up. And we're going to get into drones, stars, planets, the moon, whether Christmas related or otherwise, as part of our Cosmic Conversations.
The Other Side of Midnight presents
From the spiral to the elliptical to the lenticular to the irregular to the quasars, galaxies. Where are we in the cosmic evolutionary picture?
Always remember to keep your eyes to the skies.
The following conversations are Cosmic Conversations with Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky.
Our shepherd on that Cosmic Conversations journey, special Christmas edition, is the one and only Steve Cates. We like to call him Dr. Sky. He is a veteran radio and TV broadcaster and edutainer with a great deal of expertise in astronomy and space. And we're very, very lucky to have him as a regular contributor to our show. Merry Christmas, Steve. Thanks for joining me on Christmas morning.
Well, good morning, Frank. Merry Christmas to you. Happy Hanukkah to all the listeners out there. And for everybody else that celebrates other type of holidays. Long time ago, Seinfeld and the Strike, what did they call it? Festivus for the rest of us.
Yeah,
like that.
We did a full airing of grievances for Festivus on our show on Monday. Nobody had any complaints about you, though. I wish I could say the same about myself. What do you do for Christmas today? What's on your agenda for today?
Well, we're excited to visit some family and friends. I mean, I have brother here, I have sister, and we're looking to get together with some of those folks, my brother and sister's friends. So we're kind of doing like a rotating event around here in the Valley of the Sun, where, by the way, Frank, the temperatures here are anything but winter-like, and not to rub it in. We had an all-time high the other day, which broke the 100-year record, about 82 or 83 degrees. So we're still in the 70s, but we'll make it a happy Christmas, just like I pray everyone out there has a safe and healthy Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah.
Well, it's delightful. Now, I mean, one of the things people like to complain about the cold weather, obviously, but one of the things that you do associate with Christmas is the fact that it's cold, and there was some white stuff on the ground in our area. Being in Arizona, and I'm sure you don't miss having to shovel snow or anything like that, but being in Arizona, is there an element of Christmas that, because it's so warm, doesn't feel quite Christmassy?
Well, when you see cacti developed here and enveloped, I should say, in Christmas lights, you wonder and say, me being a native New Yorker, we were always used to the great, Rockefeller Center tree and everybody else's tree visiting as the days gone by. But really, truly, Frank, if you want to go just about 150 miles north, you can experience a lot of snow here in Arizona, Flagstaff and north. But the truth of the matter is, when you see dirt instead of grass, and you see cacti, meaning multiple cactus, if I have it right, those are usually decorated with all kinds of lights, so it looks a little different. But the feeling, I'm sure, is just the same.
Do you do any of the cooking today for your Christmas celebrations?
Luckily, I do not. And if I ever had the time, Frank, I tell you, my dream of dreams, if I ever could do this and calm down, I would love to get into one of those nice classes where you could actually learn how to cook. And many years ago, there was, and I think it still exists, one of the culinary institutes out here in Arizona. We went to a very special seating. You know, you call ahead and the students do the best they can and you rate them. Well, I had this most amazing dinner and I had to give the person like an 11 out of 10 for an out-of-this-world lobster bisque, which I really like, and that's also another holiday soup that many people, I'm sure, would create. But I would love to do it, but other people are cooking for us, and I do appreciate their kindness and the great food that we get every year when we go there.
Outstanding. That's outstanding. Now, let's get into the news that's most likely to come up at people's Christmas Day celebrations today. I think that probably has to begin with the drones, especially in the Northeast. This is all people have been talking about it. Yes. People have been fired up about these drones. People concerned that maybe the government at all levels is not telling them the truth. You and I have chatted about this a bit 2 weeks ago. What's your take on these drones, which magically seem to have gone away, at least in New Jersey? What do you think this is all about, Steve?
Well, Frank, I think it's a deep part of our government that's doing this. And again, I have no, categorical information to make me the superstar of answering the drone problem. But I believe that there's something centering around this so-called radiation spike, whatever that is. We heard earlier reports, and sorry to be redundant, that a ship may have come into harbor in the New York, New Jersey area in which there was some sort of an X-ray machine in which some type of radiation was either leaking out of it. Well, I wasn't there. But the reality is, let's go back to something that may not have been talked about a long time, ago or during this whole drone crisis, as we call it. Many people may not know that the Department of Energy has a team of people, and I'm sure there are many of them, called NEST, N-E-S-T. And if you look at all the great Super Bowls and major events, I'm sure with inaugurations and all other big public events and venues, they send up these helicopters that have indeed, very sophisticated radiation sniffing devices. So in this particular case, and again, I'm just mere speculation here, no absolute, that it could be more of a larger fleet instead of just helicopters searching for whatever this signal or whatever this radiation signal might be. And again, this is even more bizarre. Nest helicopters would fly day or night, but we're obviously only seeing Frank? Drones flying in the night and certainly not in the day. But what I think in conclusion, because this is a great mystery, of course, everybody knows that. What I'm trying to try to get an answer to, or say if I had some way of being in charge of this, I would say, let's identify the source of where these drones are coming out of. I'm sure that's something that could be done or has been done. And where are they going back to? So wouldn't that help in our analysis of what they are by finding out where they're coming from and, where they're going back to? That, I think, is just common sense.
Donald Trump came out and he said that he believes that the government knows what they are. I would tend to agree with him. Obviously, I don't get the same kind of intelligence briefings that Donald Trump gets. But given that that's the case, assuming that's the case, I should say, do you think we're likely to learn what these things are once Trump takes office?
Well, I'm hoping he's, obviously to his word, I feel he would do a good job in explaining it since he already gave us the indication that he has an idea of what it is. But again, the same thing goes back, Frank, not to change the subject, but to the same long, almost 80-year-old story of what the true definition and origin of these UFOs are. We may get some sort of a story saying, yes, it was a radiation signal that was detected, and this indeed is our military doing this so to calm everybody's fears. But in plain English, I would hope that President Trump gives us at least some sort of a response to this. And then I would want to hold him in a respectful way to hopefully, as I think he's even indicated a little subliminally, let's get an answer to what the whole UFO subject is. And also it goes deeper to knowing more about the Kennedy assassination, a totally unrelated but subject that I'm sure people have waited for a long time to get what we call truth.
Right. Yeah, I'm hopeful. I don't believe that we've gotten the full story on a number of things, and I'm hopeful that we'll hear a lot more. But I'm trying to temper my expectations because for the last 4 years that President Trump was in office, he continued the classification protocols, especially on a lot of the JFK stuff. Who knows? We'll see where it goes. It's certainly going to be interesting. My guest is Steve Cates. We call him Dr. Sky. If you want to check out, if you're interested in any of the subjects that we get into this hour, you're going to want to check out the Dr. Sky Experience, a terrific podcast, which you can get wherever podcasts are available, or just by going to redapplepodcastnetwork.com and searching the Dr. Sky Experience. All right. Obviously, the reason for the season, as it were, is Jesus. And I think most people, at least most Christians, are aware of the historical foundations for the holiday, the birth of Jesus, the three wise men visiting Bethlehem and everything like that. What do we know about the Star of Bethlehem and the star that was guiding the three wise men as they visited Jesus?
Well, Frank, it's an interesting quandary. Let's go back to who they were. We realize from science, or at least from history, that these were not astronomers, but three individuals who were really astrologers. And if we go back to the origin point of where they started their journey, 1,000 miles or more coming from Mesopotamia, Iraq, and that Fertile Crescent, that fertile area, they looked at something that keened their interest early morning in the sky, probably many, many months before they set out on the journey. But to these individual astrologers, Frank, they looked with great reverence to certain events that happened in the sky. And we're going to get into this discussion and describe what more than likely this probably was. And again, I say probably. If we look at the date of the birth of Jesus, we scratch our head because we really don't understand what exactly was that date. And not to go contrary to the Bible, the book of Matthew, I'm certainly a Christian, but I'm saying if you look into what astronomical legends have, or facts and information, the calendar is an imprecise event. Mm-hmm. We realize that Pope Gregory XIII actually decided by decree to change the calendar from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar, obviously in his name. So if you woke up on October 4th of 1582, then you woke up the next day, it was changed to October the 15th. Why do I mention this? Because the calendar doesn't give us precision, and the reason is the Earth's orbit is not a perfect circle. So to answer the question more specifically, these wise men making these journeys, they were very keen-eyed observers. Anything that changed in the heavens, they had one big advantage that hardly any of us do. They didn't have light pollution in those days. And assuming they had good eyes, obviously they would be able to detect any strange, happenings in the heavens. So the summary comes down to this. It was more than likely, according to astronomical, research, that on the date of April 17th, 6 BC, the moon was covered up or eclipsed by the planet Jupiter. The moon covered Jupiter. They call it an occultation. Now, some people may think, well, that's the Star of Bethlehem. It gets more involved. And the fact that these astrologers saw this, they obviously went to see King Herod, not a very nice person, obviously. And they came to King Herod, as we know in the simple version. They were basically saying, we're here to see the newborn king. And he then said, very emphatically, I am the king. So apparently they decided to move on, and they went where? To this birthplace of Jesus. Now, not to get controversial in religion, but some people still say, how could a star stand over a manger? Now, I don't know this for fact, but I do know in astronomy, Frank, there's a term called retrograde. And remember the days when newspapers flourished all over the country and the world? The biggest columns that were read were the financial section and the astrology section. And here we go with retrograde. What is that? Planets move in the zodiac sky. If you see them, the zodiac path, they move always every year to the west in the sky, to the east. And what happens when they start to slow down, and that's only planets Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, anything outward from the Earth. So what could have happened here is Jupiter very much could have moved backwards against the background stars over a period of time. And as the wise men, of course, went from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, this in their sky, which to us wouldn't look like anything other than a bright star, but not a significant star, that may have been one of the answers to why that apparent object seemed to stand still, as they say. And again, the Bible is not written with scientific precision, as you and I both know, It's written in a way that gives a lot of speculation to the interpretation, but I think we get this as the star, the moon, the planet Jupiter. And this was also sacred to the Jewish people because the event happened in the constellation of Aries the Ram, a very sacred constellation to the Jewish people of the time.
Well, that is wild. That is probably the most comprehensive, explanation of the Star of Bethlehem and the role the three wise men played that I've ever heard. Now, when we talk about the Star of Bethlehem, is that the same thing as the Christmas star?
It is, Frank. And let me say this much. There's way more to this story, and time, of course, doesn't permit, because there are other interpretations. This isn't the only one. But according to astronomers, all month I've been asked to speak at these various groups, and we tell this similar story. But really quickly, Johannes Kepler, a German astronomer who wrote many books on motion of the planets, the laws of planetary motion, he basically also believed a little bit in astrology. That's quite interesting for a scientist. But he claimed that there was a lot of things in the heavens at this time, that there was this triple conjunction, as we call it, of Jupiter and Saturn, that occurred over the period of maybe a year or two. And that could have also been, as we speculate, some other additional, ideas of what was in the sky. But remember, Jupiter and a bright star in Leo, because Leo the lion, of course, has a bright star called Regulus, right? And Regulus, when you translate it, it means Rex, the king. What better star to the ancients that knew of this great symbology could have also said that something very unique is happening here? There is a newborn king. Why? Because of the closeness of Jupiter. And Jupiter, Frank, comes up more than any other planet because what is it? It's the largest planetary object in the solar system. It obviously is a world of its own. But to the ancients, remember, only about 8% of the humans on this earth have ever claimed to have seen the Milky Way in the night sky because it's so light polluted. Obviously, New York, where I am in Phoenix, and all the big cities here and around the world. So imagine what the view of the ancients must have had, particularly the wise men, that they obviously had at night. They didn't have television, cell phones, or anything, so they could spend their nights mapping the heavens and were keen-eyed observers and noticed any changes.
All right. Well, we're going to continue with Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky, in a moment. A lot to get to. There are some big space launches coming up in 2025. We'll tell you about that. There are also some solar storms, which may play a role on your GPS equipment. A whole lot of other stuff to get to. And again, if you just find yourself hooked on some of these cosmic conversations, be sure to go to the Dr. Sky experience at redapplepodcastnetwork.com. We'll continue on the other side of midnight, special Christmas edition of Cosmic Conversations straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. Every 2 weeks, whether it's Christmas, whether it's Hanukkah or not, we continue Cosmic Conversations with Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky. He's our go-to expert on comets, moons, stars, drones, you name it. And whether it's Christmas or not, there's a lot of people hungry for his unique take on world affairs, which I must tell you, since we started having these conversations about 2.5, 3 years ago, Steve, my ability to ace certain categories on Jeopardy has skyrocketed. And I owe that to you because not only do you have a lot of knowledge, but you certainly have a way of explaining it that even laymen like me can understand. Steve, we hear a lot about the world of space travel. Obviously, the two of the men dominating that conversation have been Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Elon Musk is in very good standing with the incoming Trump administration. What are we expecting in terms of space launches next year?
Well, Frank, there's so many, but here's a quick summary, in my opinion, and this could change at any time. We know the strength that SpaceX has across the entire spectrum of all space launches, with, of course, the Starship taking, I guess, the main center stage. But let's take a look at around the world. The European Space Agency is set to launch a space plane of their own called Space Rider. And these names are quite interesting. What will it be? A reusable spacecraft that you could go to from the ground, let's say, or from a rocket launch, go to space in one fell swoop, do your business up there, bring astronauts there, bring supplies up there, and return safely to the Earth. Now, in China, this is very interesting, and I know you and I have had great conversations about this. Are we really in a race with China in space? We got to give them credit. We may not agree with what the Communist Chinese Party does that side, but they have one thing that I think NASA, if they were listening to me, and I'm not that important, but we all are important when it comes to our own opinion, I would say this way. Just like SpaceX seems to have a long-term focal plan, NASA, because it's a government agency, bless them, they've done many great things, and hopefully they will in the future. China seems to have a much more focused attention to their space program because they do this, just like Elon and SpaceX. That he doesn't have to go through a bureaucratic motion. Look at how much problems he's had with the EPA in trying to get some of his launches cleared for maybe some valid issues, but it's still red tape. So China is set to launch something called the Tianwen-2. What is it? It's an asteroid comet return mission. So what they're attempting to do is beat many of the other countries around the world in doing this. We've done it. The Europeans have done it. Go to a small asteroid, scoop up material and or a comet, depending on what it is, an asteroid or a comet, and return material from it. SpaceX, Frank, is going to do something interesting. We talked about Starship. They're going to do something that sounds technical. It's called a propellant transfer mission. What's that? They're going to fuel, it's called a fuel transfer between two docked starships in space. So if you're going to go to the moon and Mars, you have to basically have a so-called refueling station, like a, quote, gas station in the sky or in space. So that's a very technical maneuver. Take an empty starship, take one that has a receiver nozzle like aircraft, military aircraft do air refueling, and many others do. This will be a very interesting thing. Now, talking about Jeff Bezos, he's obviously working on a project for a lunar lander called the Blue Moon Mark 1. And hopefully that'll get some exposure in 2025. But how about this? He, along with Elon and Starlink, he is involved with a project called the Kuiper system. Kuiper system is a gigantic, set of satellite constellations in the heavens that obviously can do all the things, maybe just the same, maybe better, but certainly not less, than what Elon Starlink is doing for communications and internet and space. The bottom line, Frank, space is getting crowded. And lastly, here's a company that you probably don't hear about much called Vast Space. They are going to attempt to launch the first commercial artificial gravity space station, because what's the problem when astronauts go up in space? They're sitting there. If you watch those videos, they're kind of cool. When you see the young lady who was part of the Starliner mission, you see her get out there, and her hair is just so out there, like it's just frizzed out because of zero gravity. Imagine a space station like that in 2001 that has the ability to have artificial gravity. Isn't that incredible?
It certainly is. Steve, one of the issues that I meant to ask you about, and I didn't give you a heads up that I was going to ask you about this, but I have no doubt that you're well versed on this, is the issue of these astronauts that are at the International Space Station that did this fun Christmas video. I hate that. I mean, these are people that were expecting to go for a 1-week visit in June, and now their return home keeps getting delayed and delayed and delayed. What is the source of this latest delay for them, and where does it stand in terms of bringing them home at this point?
Well, it was originally scheduled in the long duration pause, the delay, for them to come back in February, which is just around the corner. But now it's going to be, at least this is not a guaranteed date. They're saying now, maybe late March. But here's the reason that this will take place. And the astronauts seem to be very, calm and cool, collected about it. They're going to have a new spacecraft called the Crew Dragon 10. And what's that? A new and improved spacecraft that has the ability to bring supplies. It's a little bit larger in volume capacity. But apparently they want to bring astronauts up there and make sure they have 2 extra seats to bring back the astronauts that will return, including the 2 from Starliner. So that's really what I've heard. So that Crew Dragon 10 is apparently the ship. I don't want to call it a rescue ship. It's more like a regular scheduled mission. So they have to wait probably until the end of March. But Frank, between you and I, if it gets to be May, June, and July, I would certainly have some concerns for those poor people up there.
I have to think it's not great for their health either, being stuck up there that long, much longer than they expected.
Well, I gather so, but I'm not a medical doctor, but I can tell you this. Knowing a person who's flown there many, many times, actually, she was a personal friend until I lost contact. What kind of friend is that? More my fault than any. Was Dr. Peggy Whitson. I believe she was the first female commander of the International Space Station, and I believe she holds one of the longest records in space. And she would probably be the best person to talk about with this because, look, the longer duration you have in space, it is stated that the bones start to atrophy and get weak. Certain systems in your heart start to change, not necessarily that they will kill you. But the biggest concern astronauts, I'm sure, have in space, if I was on the ISS, is I want no leaks in my spacecraft, which it does have. The space station has had a series of leaks. And also flying space debris from an overpopulated low Earth orbit, because the station is only about 260 miles up. And you know from where you're broadcasting from, or I'm broadcasting from Phoenix to Las Vegas, is like the height above the Earth that the space station is. So the truth is, hopefully they'll get, I think we were talking about the space station that can do artificial gravity. Maybe someday we'll get to that level, and I'm pretty confident we will.
But at this point, it looks like the crew is going to return in late March.
That's what they're saying. And again, nobody knows exact, but that's what they're saying based on the delivery and arrival of the Crew Dragon 10.
What's a dark comet?
Here's a strange one, Frank. If you look deep in the solar system, when the solar system was formed, way out past dwarf Pluto, there's a region out in the solar system called the Kuiper Belt and a group called the Oort Cloud. This was named after, these are last names, Kuiper and Oort. Jan Oort was an astronomer. Out in that region of the solar system, every once in a while, the debris left over from the solar system's creation, the hand of gravity pulls it in. Now, most comets have a rocky surface. We've seen images. And they have this coating of like a light ice that's on there. Call it like a snow of some sort. And when those objects get very close to the sun or closer to the sun, they start to change. What does that change mean? And we know the differences of things, liquid, solids, and gases. But on these comets, right, the traditional comet, and then we'll get to dark comets, what happens is the heat of the sun then vaporizes that ice, and it goes directly from, it doesn't pass into liquid, it goes to a gas, and they call it sublimation. Now, a dark comet, we've now started to detect, are these objects that do not probably have this icy coating on it. So not to alarm people on Christmas and Hanukkah, but these are objects that can lurk and move into the solar system. How would we be able to detect them? Because they don't have, like drones have for the most part, right? Warning or marking lights, green and red, or whatever they put on those things. The point of the matter is dark comets are a new classification of something that lurks out into the solar system, and gravity still controls them.
The one of the things that you've educated me, and I think a lot of our listeners about a great deal, has been solar weather and the role of these solar storms and how they can affect the things on this planet, namely electronics, radio signals, all sorts of other things. What are we in store for in terms of solar storms right now and in the coming weeks? And what sort of effect can we expect on, I don't know, what's happening on this planet?
Well, as we told Christmas and Hanukkah, late December, here's what's happening. On the sun right now is another large sunspot group coming from the left edge of the sun. The sun's rotating as we see it from the Earth, left to right. And one solar rotation at the equator takes about 25 days. So right now, Frank, those sunspot groups, after this broadcast, maybe tomorrow into the weekend, will move toward the center of the sun. At any time, they can blow flares out. And the propensity of those flares in the X class, which is the highest class, those can, of course, cause disruptions here on the Earth. Now, we're finding out that a lot of this disruption we had on May 10th solar superstorm and the one in October, it's interesting. farmers in fields that run these electronic machines, these automated GPS pieces of farming equipment, very expensive. I'm not a farmer. But what they've noticed is when a particular farming machine is planting seeds going in these perfectly straight rows, as you would imagine if you had a shovel and you and I were working hard at it, no thank you. These solar storms have interfered with the GPS on these particular units on the ground. And how do we tell? The seed line is not a straight line, but this curvy, wild line. Now, some people may say, well, wait a minute. How do you stop that? The problem is it's not just there. Wait and see if we get this big solar belch that could come at any time. It will affect not only the GPS satellites as it has in the past, but again, many people think that the solar cycle 25 is now waning. Here's an interesting bit of information. In the southern hemisphere of the sun, we've had most of the flare activity. We have yet to see what the northern hemisphere will do, because the northern hemisphere, in this case, will lag behind it. Bottom line in conclusion, solar cycle 25, which was probably supposed to be peaking now, may be pushed into the mid portion of 2025. So get on our hats and we get out there and, hopefully we'll not be hit with any major solar storms, but we've had them over the last 6 months.
I'll say, and you say the best place to kind of monitor that whole thing and the weather with respect to what's going on with the sun is spaceweather.com?
I agree, and it's always been my source for a lot of things that we talk about because it has some of the best information, and also to give a plug to the other one that we utilize all the time doing our programs and visual observation is theskylive.com. Can't find a better site made by our friends in Italy, and it gets world recognition on if you're looking for things in the nighttime sky. And then quickly, one other, if you're looking at satellites, just go to heavens-above.com. You'll become the superstar in your neighborhood by telling your friends and neighbors, over there in 2 minutes will be the space station.
I love that. That's good advice. Heavens-above.com.
Right.
Steve, before we break, there's a recording of yours that I came across that I found it very apropos, obviously, for Christmas because I'm a Santa Claus fan, and obviously this can only be delivered with your melodious voice. Set this up for us. What are we about to hear?
Well, Frank, a long time ago, I was asked to do a short little recording of the story of Santa for children. And I think this is great as we move into the Christmas and Hanukkah season. The beautiful story of Santa and toys and talking about children that didn't have toys. And there we go. Here we go. I think an interesting way of celebrating and marking this momentous time as we celebrate this holiday.
It is said long ago that children from around the world would wake up on Christmas Day and find to their delight the gift of toys, the generosity from a man named Claus. But Claus thought that none of the children would ever know where the toys came from, and that being okay with him. But his kindly deeds that made so many children happy would carry to far lands and not go unrecognized. So for miles and miles in every direction, people were talking of Claus and his wonderful gifts to children. The sweet kindness of his work would remind folks of their respect for a man so gentle-natured that he loved to devote his life to pleasing the helpless little ones. Therefore, the inhabitants of every city and village had been eagerly watching for the coming of Claus. Stories of beautiful playthings were told to the children to keep them patient and contented. When, on the morning following the trip of Claus with his deer, the little ones came running to their parents with the pretty toys they had found, and asked from whence they came, there was but one reply to the question. The good Claus must have been here, my darlings, for his are the only toys in all the world. But how did he get in? Asked the children. At this, the fathers shook their heads, being themselves unable to understand how Claus had gained admittance to their homes. But the mothers, watching the glad faces of their dear ones, whispered that the good Claus was no mortal man, but assuredly a saint, and they blessed his name for the happiness he had bestowed upon the children. A saint, said one with bowed head, has no need to unlock doors if it pleases him to enter our homes. And from then on, when a child was naughty or disobedient, its mother would say, "You must pray to the good Santa Claus for forgiveness, for naughty children will receive no more pretty toys." But Santa Claus himself would not have approved this speech. You see, he brought toys to the children because they were little and helpless, and because he loved them. He knew that the best of children were sometimes naughty, and that the naughty ones were often good. It's the way with children the world over. And that is how our Claus became Santa Claus and enshrined himself as a saint in the hearts of the people.
The Other Side of Midnight. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas everywhere you go.
This is The Other Side of Midnight, Cosmic Conversations edition. It is Christmas. It is Hanukkah. It is probably a whole bunch of holidays that I'm not even aware of. But for me, it's a holiday every 2 weeks because in this hour, we get to chat with Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky. He's a veteran radio and TV broadcaster and edutainer with a great deal of expertise in astronomy and space. Also a terrific podcaster. If you want to hear his podcast, just search The Dr. Sky Experience on any podcast app, or you can go to redapplepodcastnetwork.com. Steve, obviously there's going to be a lot of attention paid to Santa Claus today because this is his day. This is the day that he's the busiest guy on the planet. But one of the stories that caught my attention, and I'm hoping you can enlighten us a bit about, is the story of the rocket sled guy, Colonel John Stapp. Something tells me this is not a rocket sled that's being pulled by flying reindeer, is it?
No, absolutely not. But this is a gentleman that, through osmosis, if you want to call it, I knew another person who was based at Holloman Air Force Base, and he probably had more fame than the guy we're going to be talking about with the rocket sled. Joe Kittinger, back in August of 1960, held the world record of going up in a balloon with a spacesuit on and jumped from 102,000 feet. And he was beaten, I say the word kind of, I shouldn't say beaten, he was surpassed by an Austrian gentleman, I guess maybe 10 years ago, Felix Baumgartner, who went up a little higher. But this history of what goes on at this Holloman Air Force Base is amazing. Let's go back in our time capsule to December 11th, 1954. And what they were doing at the time with the U.S. Air Force is testing the endurance of man inside what they call the rocket sled. What's that? It's a long railroad track that goes many, many miles. And on top of that was this particular sled with a man strapped into it, literally strapped in. His name was Colonel John Stapp. So when they fired this rocket off, can you imagine the G-forces on his body? The unit was called the Sonic Wind rocket sled. So on that day, a long, long time ago, he reached a speed on the track, this is incredible, of 632 miles per hour. Imagine that on the ground. And then, Frank, the hard part is, imagine you and I doing this. He came to a sudden stop in 1.4 seconds. Now, you would imagine that would kill any human or animal. He hit with a force of 42 measured Gs. Now, your fighter pilots that are pulling all these Gs in these, fourth and fifth generation aircraft are probably doing like 9 Gs. And I bailed out of a project. They wanted me to go for a backseat ride in the F-16 out here at Luke Air Force Base. And I said, no, thank you. I love you all. God bless the military. I sent my brother. And he was doing 9 Gs, and he loved it. No, thank you, Frank. And I say that. I don't know how you would do it if you would want to, but here's what happened to poor Colonel John Stapp. Now, this is sad. He caused some serious organ damage to his body. And then the hard part was he'd gone temporarily blind from ruptured blood vessels in his eyes.
Oh, boy.
Now, there's a guy, and I know a man here in Scottsdale, Arizona, who was also based at Holloman Air Force Base, And he said to me, this gentleman, who's now in his 90s, that Colonel Stapp was his best man at the wedding that they had. But this was just before he went into the rocket sled. Could you imagine that, Frank?
No.
Going that fast? And the only other world record that, people have probably looked at as far as what's the fastest vehicle that ever went across the ground, there was this British team that set up this, I think it was called SSC or something like that. And it was this black-looking needle-nosed vehicle. And it went across the northern Nevada desert. And I believe, if I'm correct in this, and I'd have to do the actual research, people can check it out, he went faster and broke the sound barrier on the ground. Now, could you imagine seeing that, where they have that crazy festival that they have up in Nevada? Forgive me for not remembering what it is. I should know. Burning Man. And imagine seeing that thing going across the desert. That would look very strange indeed. So people have pushed their bodies all in the for the pursuit of a financial prize, research, and in the case with Colonel John Stapp, long live the great Colonel John Stapp for all the research he did to help future astronauts in our space program.
Yeah, I'll say on hopefully a more upbeat note. Not that there's anything not upbeat about John Stapp's service to the country, but certainly the way that it ended is not exactly what we'd hope for. What can people look forward to seeing in the night sky if they have family over doing some stargazing? If it warms up a little bit and they're able to step outside, or even in the coming days and weeks, either with the naked eye or if somebody has a telescope, which is what I got my brother for his birthday last week. He enjoyed very much, so I'm sure he's going to be listening very carefully. What can people look forward to in the night sky?
Well, Frank, here's a treat for everybody, younger or older. If you want a replicant for the Star of Bethlehem, try this. Look to the southwest sky after dinner, just around sunset, let's say. And that beautiful white beacon of light that you see, unmistakable in the sky, it's not a drone, I can assure you. That is the planet Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. Now, of all the planets that we've talked about being that possible Star of Bethlehem, Venus wasn't listed as one officially. But our imaginations can go wild, and especially for young children, they can get an understanding of what that might have been in the biblical days when this particular time of an event did occur, the sacred birth of Jesus Christ. And then if you look over to the northeast, while you're still out there, just turn your head to the northeast. About 15, 20 degrees high there, the bright white object is Jupiter. How about that? Just what we talked about. Maybe more likely one of the true answers of the Star of Bethlehem. And then, Frank, a really interesting thing happens. If you stay out there, no matter what the temperature and hopeful clear skies, the red god of war Mars is up there by about 10 p.m. And Frank, here's something that I'm going to break some news here on your show here in our program, Cosmic Conversations. Folks, get set for the night of January 13th, because all across North America, we are going to see a replica of what we think was the event type that caused the Star of Bethlehem, an occultation where the moon covers up. In this case, it was Jupiter. But on that night, January 13th, the time zones will vary, and we can talk about it in our next encounter. You will see the moon and the planet Mars just to the left edge of the moon, a full moon, mind you. And that will be a sight to see because that's very rare indeed. And many, many people read into this that it's more than just a beautiful event, those that believe more in astrological things. But the truth is, how many times do you get to see a major planet when it's closest to the Earth? And a full moon, so that'll be great.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. One of the this is a time of year where we discuss the North Pole a great deal, and in addition to being where Santa Claus lives, it's also a place where there's a magnetic North Pole that people get referred to a great deal, and it affects compasses and things of that nature. I saw a headline this week that Earth's magnetic pole has a new location. Which magnetic pole is this, and how did it get a new location?
Well, we start off by answering it this way, Frank. There's a geopole, which is pretty simple. That's where the lines of latitude and longitude cross, simply 90 degrees if you put your finger at the very top of the North Pole. But a geomagnetic pole is very interesting. What is that? Due to all the forces inside the Earth, bubbling magma, they say there's a big bubble on one side. What happens, and I'm keeping it simple, because it really is fascinating and very complex, I'm sure. But with those bubbles in this liquid magma, and other strange inequalities in the Earth, that North Pole geomagnetic pole has been wandering. In the early 1900s, it used to be in northern Canada. It's now moving up to the top of the Earth and moving over to Russia. So if somebody wants to write this down, hopefully they're not driving, the exact location of the geomagnetic pole right now is latitude north, 86.5 degrees, and east longitude, 164 degrees. But what's interesting, Frank, is that every year, this particular geomagnetic pole has been moving on an average of 21.5 miles per year. So that means if you were standing at the current location and you had, let's say, a way to see that if there was a marker, it would be moving if you stayed there for a while. I mean, 21.5 miles in a year, well, you'd have to stay there for a long time. But that small distance is due to the changes in the Earth internally, causing a magnetic field change. And guess what else it's going to affect eventually? Our GPS. And as we were talking about airports, runways, of course, may have to be reconfigured with their numbers in the future because they're constantly changing if you're using geomagnetic compasses to navigate through the sky.
I mean, that is wild. I mean, I guess that means that we'll have to get a new compass.
Probably. But no, again, not to always depend on electronic technology. But again, I think the main themes that I'm getting through here, and I think they're coming through very clear, is that even with the description of the date of the birth of Jesus Christ, we don't know specifically, not due any fault that we didn't study or we don't know what we're talking about, is that the truth is there's changes in the Earth's orbit. And of course, here on the Earth, everything is in constant motion throughout the whole cosmos. And it's so fascinating to be talking about this, on a show that we call Cosmic Conversation.
No doubt about it. Europa, the moon of Jupiter, apparently it's being reported that the ice on Europa is much thicker than we originally thought. Is there any significance to this at all, Steve?
Not necessarily at this point, and there needs to be a clarification. Some people, not you and I've heard report this, and we don't hold them to task on this. We just want to give accurate information. Some were saying that the Europa Clipper is going to descend onto Europa, drill through the hole, meaning the ice, and say, hey, is there anything down there? Is there anybody out there or under there?
Steve, remind me, from my benefit, what is the Europa Clipper?
The Europa Clipper is a spacecraft that's been long in coming. And a gentleman that I interviewed many times, he was a congressman from Texas, Congressman Culbertson. He was one who was really responsible, among a few others, to get the funding for it. It's a spacecraft that's headed the long way to Jupiter. It's actually going, or it's passing Mars after it left the Earth, come back and swing around the Earth, and then swing out to Jupiter and Europa, the moon, in the year 2030. But the problematic thing with that is some people thought that it was actually the lander. It really can't do much research at this point, by staying there, because the great radiation that's involved with Jupiter and the moons that are in, like Europa's like second closest of the major moons. So they're going to get some views, but they got to kind of be real quick, and it's got to move far out again, then come back in. Hopefully someday we'll get an answer, because in Arthur C. Clarke's novels, 2001 and 2010, one of the things that was expressed very emphatically in 2010 is keep away from Europa. And that's interesting because even the great Arthur C. Clarke wrote something about it long before we knew that that might be a place where there was some form of life underneath the ice on this satellite that Galileo discovered back in 1610.
Steve, whether it's Christmas, Hanukkah, or just a regular Wednesday morning, the hour just flies by whenever we're together. Thank you so much for the time this morning. Merry Christmas. I hope you and your family have a great day today, and I'll look forward to chatting with you again in a couple of weeks.
Well, thank you, Frank. Health and happiness to you, the listeners, in 2025. And what do we say? Always remember to keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground, and proud to be your navigator here on this journey on Cosmic Conversation.
Absolutely. And to quote the great Casey Kasem, on Christmas or any other holiday, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.